So I wanted to spend about 5 minutes with you this morning. And for one, it's been a long time since I've done a video blog post. And two, I think that yeah, I just think this was a post that was worthy of hearing rather than reading. Um, you know, over the last couple of months, I continually get people who will talk to me about that are readers of my blog will say things like, your perspective is really important to me, and I think if I can read between the lines, it's because I'm talking to the people that you're trying to reach, and you aren't. And I don't mean that as a cut down. I know I've worked in a church, and I know how difficult it is to actually talk to people who don't come to church, who might be curious about church, but you're too busy doing church or working at the church to actually get out there and do it yourself. So um, I wanted to just share a quick story about a conversation I had last month over lunch that I think would be revealing to you as you are wrestling with this idea of what's going on out there. Like why do people stop coming to church, or why are they not part of the church? So I was having lunch with three gentlemen, and they're all three gentlemen who grew up around church. One actually, whose dad is a pastor and at a big denomination, and another guy who kind of grew up going to a bunch of different religious experiences, not even just all churches, just a whole bunch of different things, and another guy who grew up in church from infancy all the way until the moment he got a car and said he never came back. In all three cases, so anyways, we sit down and about 10 minutes into the conversation, one of the guys goes, "So I don't get the church thing. I just don't get it. Can you explain to me everything, like the whole thing? Start with Jesus." Um, and it kind of took me aback, particularly because I knew that these guys they had already told me that they were part of a church or even currently going to church. And I was like, "Well, what do you mean?" And so we got into things like denominations. What is a denomination? How do we get here? What are all these different churches we see? Who are they, and where did they come from? And are they all practicing the same religion, or what is that all about? And what's the difference between Catholicism and Protestantism? And why did the Reformation happen? And what does Jesus have to do with all of this? And who are these people with the flashy churches? I don't understand that. And it really drilled into me just this idea that we can't continue making assumptions about people who come to church. And as I think about the action of coming to church, and also the action of going or being a person who works at a church, we always say things like, "It's good to see you. It's good to see you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for being a part of our community." But I think that we miss something there, because we assume that because someone comes to church, A, that they get it and they understand what the heck is going on, and B, that they feel like they're part of a community. And I could tell you, as somebody who goes to church, nobody talks to me. I go to a really good church. If I don't seek out conversation's not going to happen. And I don't think that's just my church. I think that that's pretty much every church. It's definitely every church I've ever worked at. If you didn't seek out conversation and I wasn't specifically looking for you, you weren't on my hit list that day, you're not going to get talked to. And so you could go to church for weeks or months or even years and show up on Sunday morning and listen to the sermon. And the only record that you were even there is your giving. And you know that. So I think that there's something to this idea, though, that we can't make assumptions about the people who are attending our churches. We can't afford to, because in reality, they're not getting anything. So I have three things that I want to challenge you to not assume. And these are things that I've learned from talking to the people that you are trying to reach, people who are curious about Christ, but don't get it. First of all, don't assume that they're learning. Just because they're coming to church and just because they're listening to the pastor's sermons or whatever, don't assume that they're learning anything, because in reality, a sermon is a really horrible learning environment. There's nowhere else in their life that they're going to sit down for 20 or 30 or 50 minutes and be lectured at. A lecture, it's a joke from an academic perspective, because you will retain almost nothing. I go to a church with a really good pastor, and I can remember the topic from a week ago or 2 weeks ago, but I can't remember anything else. Zero. None. I would get an F on a test. So it's just a really bad learning environment. People do not learn by lecture today. But I don't know why. That goes into other questions of why do we do sermons and so on. So I don't know the answer to those questions. I do know that they're not good learning environments. And so if we assume that people are coming to church and they're attending the service, then they must be learning something. That's false. They're not. You could go to church for years and nobody will ever ask you a question about a message or did you apply anything or so on and so forth. People learn by discussion. People learn by trying things. Yeah. So just don't assume that they're learning because they're there. Because they're over and over again, I have these conversations where it's clear they're not. There's nothing. They're not getting anything out of it. Second thing is this: don't assume that they get the big picture. Simple things like, what's the difference between a Presbyterian and a Methodist? If you've never been told and you don't understand church history at all, and you don't know that. You have no idea what these differences are. You have no idea why we have different churches. You read the Bible and you go like, there was one church and now there's hundreds of them in my community. Why? If you don't tell someone the big picture, they're not just going to go figure it out. It just isn't going to happen. And as a result, people don't get the big picture and they get confused and they're just openly confused. And it's confusing. It's even confusing for someone like me who works with a lot of different churches. So just don't assume that they get it. Don't assume that they know what makes someone Protestant or what makes someone Catholic or what makes someone Baptist or so on and so forth. If you're not telling them the big picture, they don't get it. And the last thing is this: don't assume that because they hang around that they know why they're even there. And I can't tell you how many times I've sat down for a beer or have lunch with a guy or a woman, usually a guy, and they go, yeah, I go to church sometimes. They don't know why they go. They don't go because of Jesus. They go because their wife wants them to go. They go because they think it's the right thing to do. They go because they think it makes them a good person. They go because they like Jesus and they want to hear about Jesus, and they're a little disappointed that they're not experiencing Christ on a Sunday morning. But by and large, the people that I'm engaging with recently, they don't know why they even go. It's just something that they do, and it makes them feel good. And that really gets to the heart of the gospel, doesn't it? I mean, the gospel is not about making you feel good. It's not about giving you a warm fuzzy. Jesus could really give a rip about that. So I just think that those are a few powerful observations, I think, about assumption that I think folks in the church that are working in churches need to hear. You need to understand that people aren't getting it. They don't know why they're there. They're not necessarily learning anything. Sunday, honestly, it's either not enough or it's not the right mode. Okay. That's what I'm thinking. So I'd love your feedback, comments, whatever. Let's continue this conversation about the power of assumption in church leadership.